Your alternative talk radio contact, The Planet, KGRAradio.com.
With infinite complacency, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
And however you want to do it as far as the location, you can say the state, you can leave that anonymous, or you can be as specific as you were in the email. That all that is totally up to you, of course.
Well, see, the thing is none of that exists. That area, this does not exist anymore. It's all paved over. It's got townhomes. The Gwinnett Civic Center is sitting right in the middle of it now. So I'm not really worried about, somebody trying to go out there and find it, because it's, it's not there.
Right. Nothing to hunt there anyway now, so, yeah.
There's nothing to hunt there now anyway, and I think the location is kind of important because, like I said, 30 years ago, it was very rural, and it was kind of blocked off by 4 surrounding towns. So, there was something that could have been kind of entrapped in that area.
Right. Well, and I found it really cool in your email how you said your mother, your aunt, and your older sister actually grew up in that very same house. So in the same area and actually in the same house, and they all had similar experiences, right?
To some extent. My sister used to always, when we started talking about it, once I was about 20 or so, I broached the subject by saying, it used to be really weird in so-and-so area. Mm-hmm. And she'd say, oh, yeah, I'd never go back in that area. And then my mom chimed in and said, well, me and your aunt would never go this place, and we would never go that place. And my sister always said, I thought I was being watched. And I always thought that there was a watcher in the woods. Mm. And you don't know what weird is if you're growing up in weird.
Right. No, absolutely.
And it really took me moving, up the road about 30 miles and getting out into the woods out here and saying, it doesn't feel odd to me.
Yeah, and before you jump into a couple of these stories, just mention to everybody kind of what you did in the email about, as far as there was very few deer around, and that that you would hear strange things at night, and the part where your dad would say more things like, okay, well, watch out for snakes and the bees and the hornets, but your mom just kind of would keep kind of quiet about it. Like she wanted to say, well, there's other things besides that, but she never really went that far.
She never said that she never felt threatened. She felt like she'd gotten watched a couple of times.
Yeah.
She'd had kind of scares in the woods, but, she never saw anything. It seems like my sister saw a shadow or something one night. Outside her bedroom window. But yeah, this time of year back then, like I said in the email, and I try not to keep saying like in the email so you don't have to edit it out so much.
That's okay.
This time of year, I would get home, get off the bus, grab my BB rifle or grab my .22 rifle, and head to the woods. And I'd, take some stuff. And on a Friday afternoon, my parents wouldn't even worry about me until Sunday if I was late for dinner.
Right.
And the main rule they had was I had to be in range. If they went outside and blew the car horn, I had to come running. So I had to stay, kind of close enough in the woods. So if somebody blew a car horn, we'd do it.
Right.
And of course, the our friends, they were friends with my friend's parents. So if I was over at Jason's and Jason, since he's already deceased, not worried about using his name.
Yeah.
I'm going to try not to use the last names of Ryan and Carrie, or any last names really, because I haven't talked to them in 25 years, so I don't know really what they're doing. I'm up at Ryan's and Carrie's house. They call up, say, hey, blow your horn, so Chip will come up and just tell them to go home. It was a lot different than it is today. There isn't any helicopter moms. It's just not, just didn't happen back then.
Right.
We lived in an area that we didn't lock on the doors at night. It just was that type of growing up, mid-'80s was wonderful. Camped out a lot, spent a lot of time in the woods, had fun. This is in the area where the Gwinnett Civic Center is now. To the north is Suwanee, Georgia. To the west is Duluth, Georgia, and that's where I went to school, and, that was the address, was Duluth, Georgia. To the southwest was Norcross, and then to our east was Lawrenceville, Georgia. And all of this area was very wooded, lots of hardwoods, lots of pine trees, lakes and snakes, lots of creeks, great place to, grow up in the woods. I would say I probably had the run of about 300 acres.
See, now that's a great way to grow up.
Yeah. And we would go out in the woods, and things that happened we attributed to other kids. And the older I've got, and the older I thought, and the longer I thought about it, these kids would have had to be super ninjas to pull some of this stuff off. First of all, we weren't growing up in the neighborhood. Me and Jason and Ryan and Carrie were friends, not because we had a lot of stuff in common, but because of where we lived. I mean, Jason was about a quarter of a mile up the road. Ryan and Carrie were about half a mile up the road, if that. Anybody else, well, they were, almost a mile in that direction or almost a mile in that direction. And that was pretty much, who we played with. And luckily, because we were growing up together, we did have the same interests. We all came from different economic backgrounds. Jason was lower income. I was middle income. And Ryan and Carrie, their father was getting in on the tech boom back then. Something to do with Macintosh computers, Apple computers, when they first got started. And, they were well off. So I don't think if it was this time in history, if the four of us would even be friends, because we would have that economic differential.
Right.
But since we were the only kids to play with, we were the kids to play with.
Yeah, because your first incident that you detailed, you were like 3 or 4, and you were in the garden or something, right?
Right. We had a garden. My parents had a garden that they worked just about every year. And I remember they had went to the house for some reason. I was out there by myself. Seems like I was playing in the mud with the hose. And I remember there was kind of a game trail or something. And once again, we didn't see a lot of game. We would see trails. We would see tracks of deer, but we never really saw the deer.
Mm-hmm.
I knew we had turkeys. I never saw a turkey, but we saw tracks. Saw strange tracks that I learned later on were wild pigs. Never saw any sign of wild pigs at all, except for the tracks that I didn't know what they were at that point. It was just something kind of, scared me, and I felt like I needed to look up. And there was something moving in the bushes out by the garden. Probably, I'm not going to guess how far away, because I was 3 years old, but it wasn't that far away.
Mm-hmm.
And I could sense that it was like coming towards me. I remember being very afraid, and I remember at that point, I'm getting out of here and running back to the house. But from that point on, I wouldn't go out to the garden by myself. I would go, with them. That was one of my earliest memories, and it was definitely a fight or flee. Another thing, and I was kind of thinking about this tonight as well, around that time, I also started sleeping in my parents' bed a lot. I wouldn't stay in my room. And seems like I had seen something out the window or something of that nature. I decided, it's time to go get in Mommy and Daddy's bed.
Right.
And I did that probably until I was about 6. So it was, a couple of years where, I wouldn't stay in my room very long at all.
I wonder if that's a memory that might surface at some point, or maybe you don't want it to, right? Maybe your sister seems like she might have seen something out a window one night, like a shadow or something. So,
and I'm open to this stuff because all of this stuff happened very at an early age. These encounters and these situations.
Yeah.
I just know that there was a reason I did these things. I don't know what the reason was, but. And it might have just been that, I had a bad nightmare or something. I'm not going to say, well, it was definitely Bigfoot that made me, but no. The other encounters I spoke about, they happened more in the mid-'80s. The garden incident, 75, 76, I was probably still sneaking into the parents' bed until 1980 or so.
The next thing that you mentioned to me was when you were probably 11 or 12, and it was the rock throwing incident, which was a really interesting one because of how accurate one of them ended up being.
The 4 of us, me, Ryan, Carrie, and Jason, I think we were on our way going up to Ryan and Carrie's house. We were walking up, and we lived on a dirt road, and I don't remember what started it, but something was throwing rocks out of the woods at us. And weren't very accurate, but they were something with that. And we had some troublemakers in our little area, and they were twins that lived about a mile away from where we lived, and they had some issues at school, and they had some issues with the police, and they were, I believe, a year or 2 older than Carrie. Carrie was the oldest one in our group, and he was 2 years older than I was. Like I said, anything that happened, we kind of thought, well, it must be James and John. I don't remember ever seeing anything that was throwing the rocks. I just remember the rocks being thrown at us.
Mm-hmm.
We stood there, probably 3 or 5 minutes, throwing rocks back and forth, and, just throwing rocks into the woods. What kind of broke it up was I got hit square in the head, top of the head, by a rock that was coming from the woods. And I mean, head wounds bleed, this bled. I thought I was dead. I mean, I was as much blood was coming out of me. I was sure that my life was over.
Was your friends freaking out at that?
Oh yes, absolutely. That I don't remember if it was Ryan or Jason. Both of them were the closest ones to my age.
Mm-hmm.
One of them took me home, helped me get home, and we both told my parents what was going on, and, my parents didn't fall for, something, they immediately said, well, y'all were throwing rocks at each other.
Right.
I remember that Ryan and Carrie, because they ran to their house and told their parents, and their parents called to check on me and make sure, and my dad said, I think they were throwing rocks at each other, and we all got grounded.
That really sucks, though. After all that, you're bleeding profusely, and then you end up getting grounded.
Well, and that was one of those things of my dad stuck a towel on my head, and we sat there for about 15 minutes, and he said, if it's still bleeding, they go to the emergency room, but it's just a little scratch. It's nothing. It's just where it is on your head, and it stopped bleeding, so that was fine. We were probably all grounded for about a week. I think Jason got out of it because he was the one who took me home and
right.
all of that. But like I said, never saw anything. And, this stuff wasn't available back then. This sort of information wasn't available back then. I knew nothing about the possibility of a Sasquatch throwing rocks at you or tree knocking or anything of that nature until probably a couple of years ago. And, about the same, I was at home doing laundry in the morning, and somebody had suggested a Coast to Coast AM show, one of Art Bell's old ones.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of spiraled into that. I got into Missing 411, and that's when I started stumbling on, and, following all the stuff on David Paulides. That's when I stumbled onto Expanded Perspectives. That's when I stumbled onto Sasquatch Chronicles, all of that. And that's when I started listening to this. And I'm like, that kind of fills in some holes.
Right. Okay, so this next one is the one that when I first read it, I do get a number of emails, so I skim through stuff really fast. It's not anybody's fault but my own. I skimmed through too fast. I didn't quite catch the first time what you were saying, but then when you pointed out, no, here's what's going on, it actually creeped me out so much more because it reminded me a lot of a story that Kathy and Bob Strain have told about basically just walking by or walking over. Later, what they realized was maybe a Sasquatch.
And see, it creeped me out that much then and confused me that much then.
Yeah.
That even after 30 years, I remember.
Yeah,
because
I would too.
Something was wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't ever remember walking and smelling something. Okay.
So,
and if I did, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to tell you, start from the beginning, because I also find it, because you did bring up the 411, and I also find it interesting that you mentioned the fact that there was a massive blackberry patch in amongst this stand of trees where you guys were kind of camping out and having a fort.
Right. We had a fort in this Pine Grove area, and it was kind of, it was near the garden area that we had, and a pine tree had fallen in such a manner that we were able to build like a little fort tree house on it, and we had tarps and stuff, and it was our main fort. We would spend a lot of weekends camping out there. During the summer, I know that we probably camped out there entire weeks because if we needed anything, my grandmother's house was right across the road.
Right.
So, we could walk over there. And one night we were playing a game that we called Search, which is basically the opposite of hide and seek. Everybody looks for one person. Yeah,
as opposed to one person looking for everybody else.
Everybody, right.
Yeah.
And we all had flashlights, but we didn't use the flashlights because that would give away our position. We only used the flashlights when we thought we had found that person. And we knew that area pretty well. Our next door neighbors, which were, maybe 200 yards or so down the road, and it was between our houses, and this area was, all woods, and between their parents and my dad, they had cut trails all through this little pine area.
Mm-hmm.
And one of these trails circled this big briar patch. I was walking down that trail that night, and I was I was going to use a pine tree that was a big pine tree that was just inside the briar patch. That's kind of a landmark because off to the other side of that trail, another trail went down the hill from it. So I was walking, it was very dark, and I passed this pine tree. So I got ready to turn, and I realized, well, that's funny. The trail's not there. So I walked a little bit, and I'm like, maybe it's a little further down. And I walked down, and that's when I came across the other pine tree. And the trail was right across the other side. That's odd. And it was odd enough at that point for me to say, so what did I just pass? Because there's no other trees in that briar patch area. And I turned around and walked back, and it was gone. I tried to justify that, okay, I really didn't see the pine tree I passed. I just thought that I had passed it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always been something there saying, that's odd.
Right. Because you actually stopped and thought about it, so you're pretty damn sure that it really happened, yeah.
That there was that something was not right then. I never smelled, to my knowledge, I don't remember smelling any odd smells.
How close by it did you go, Chip?
I was probably within 10 feet.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, that just gives me the chills. Okay, and then obviously you thought that it was the pine tree, so, I mean, it was a long time ago, but, I mean, you know, and it was dark and you were walking by it, you thought it was a tree for a split second. How tall? How big?
Yeah, I'm listening to, you know, one of the 411 tales about fairy patches and everything, and that's when I had full-blown moose enlightenment that, oh my God, could it have been? And, I mean, I had goosebumps that night.
Yeah.
You know, even thinking back on it, this pine tree that I used as the landmark, I wouldn't have been able to reach my arms around. So whatever was standing there, if something was standing there, and I got mistaken as it was a pine tree, it would have been massive.
Wow. Oh God.
And you know, once again, it didn't interrupt the game. We continued to play.
You didn't tell them?
I know. No. I would have. Like I said, it wasn't weird because we were growing up in weird.
Right. Well, that's true. And really, what would you say? I mean, you're like, well, I walked by the pine tree that wasn't the pine tree. You know, now it's not there. And, right. How do you even start that?
And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I got lost in the dark.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's what I played it off as was, you know, that's how but it was enough of a moment of confusion that I tucked it away and said, this is weird. This is odd.
And you were so close to it, though. That is just, It could have just reached right out and grabbed you, and nobody would have known what would have happened. It could have run off with you, like you said, missing 411. It flashes in your head.
If we did have something in those woods, if we did have a swamp ape or a Sasquatch or whatever, we didn't have many.
Mm-hmm.
And the one or ones we had were very shy and very, I won't say friendly, but they didn't want to do us any harm.
Right.
If it was a situation with throwing rock, I really think that it was, you know, if there was one, it was go away. You know, let me scare you away, go away, and then they didn't expect a bunch of 12 and 14-year-olds to throw rocks back at it.
Right.
I would like to say, and I'm not sure because it's the mind of a 12 or 13-year-old boy. It seemed, you know, I look back and I'm wondering if there was just one thing throwing rocks or if there was one or two. I don't think the volume would have necessitated having more than two, but it seems like they were coming from different directions, not from the same place. But I don't know. The next incident is the one at the lake.
Yes, the camping at the lake, like you said earlier, which I love the saying, lakes and snakes. So it's time for the lake story, which is also extremely striking because this time you actually did get to see a little something.
I believe that this probably happened in 1984. I'm not certain of that. You know, it was coming up summertime. It was the last week of school or so, and we were all excited about. We had just gotten into fishing, and we were having a great time fishing out of Jason's little pond back behind his house, about the size of maybe a little bit bigger than a football field.
Mm-hmm.
It had a lot of brim in it, and we caught some bass out of it, and it was just, you know, we were having a blast. And the big thing was, God, I can't wait until we got out of school so we could all just go down there and camp overnight, and we can fish, and we can, you know, hunt snakes, and we can play search down there, and that was our plan. Graduation gift for Ryan and Carrie, like I said, their parents were wealthy. They informed them the day before they got out of school or that morning that they had purchased a condo in Daytona Beach, Florida, and they were going to be spending most of the summer down there, and y'all are getting up Saturday morning, and we're packing, and we're getting up Saturday morning, and we're heading down there for a couple of weeks. So it was just me and Jason. Got our camping gear together. We went down to the lake. We set up our tent. We started fishing. We started having a good time. Ryan and Carrie were getting up and going to Florida the next morning as far as we knew. I remember Just before it got dark and everything, it started raining. Clouds moved in, and, we had a little summer shower. During that time, we went in the tent, played cards. I remember it was crazy 8. We fell asleep. And I don't know what time it was because we didn't wear watches or anything back then. But it was well after dark. The rain had quit, and I woke up to Jason putting his shoes on. And I'm like, what's going on? Where are you going? And he said, I hear something over in the woods. Like what? Like Ryan and Carrie sneaking up on us to scare us. And, I'm thinking that's kind of plausible because Carrie was 2 years older than us, and he would prank us and do stuff like this all the time.
Right.
We climbed out of the tent. Jason had his BB gun with him. And we go down to where the fire was, which was just smoldering at this point. Everything was wet. We didn't have a lot of light, but the sky was kind of clear at that point, and we did have a moon. And we could see the other side of the lake. Not well, but we could see the other side of the lake. And just guessing at this point, it was maybe 30 to 40 yards across at that, where we were at the other shore. And it also, we'd kind of been in a little bit of a drought, and the lake level was down. And on the other side of the bank, there was a little bit of a beach, and then a step up to the bank itself. Where it was coming from was this area that was another pine grove. We were always kind of, I won't say scared, we just stayed away from that place for some reason.
Yeah.
It had an eerie feeling. It always seemed like it was just before dark, no matter what time we went over there. No real bushes or anything like that, just pine trees and a floor of pine straw. And it was out past the dam, and we were listening and everything, and sure enough, I heard something kind of coming up through that area. Now, for Ryan and Carrie to have come from that direction, they would have had to go down the road they lived on, Meadow Church Road, probably about at least half a mile, because there was a bunch of houses along that road on top of the hill. Come down the hill into that area, which I can't believe they would have done that at night. And then come up to the dam and that bank area and everything. That didn't seem plausible to me at that point. I'm like, I don't think that's Ryan and Carrie. And we were kind of thinking, well, it might be a hunter, but nothing's in season to hunt at this time. So we're watching this area, and we hear something splash in next to the bank over at the dam. Start walking up past this big water oak that hung out over the lake, and it came out from underneath the limbs, and it was odd-looking. Couldn't tell really what it was because it was a long way away, and it just was kind of walking just a few feet in the water along the bank, down on the other side of the lake, along the bank, just directly across. And we were watching it, and we were both just kind of stunned. Something told me then, that's not a man. It's, I don't know if it was the way it was walking. I don't know if it was how it was shaped. I remember thinking that its arms were really long, and it walked down the bank until it was almost directly across from us. Mm-hmm. It glanced over. I still think it smelled the smoke or something. And it glanced over, and I guess it saw us. Or it saw our tent, or it saw something. And it took off up the other side of that bank. And that bank was filled with briars and honeysuckle and also, and we were right next to a big little privet. Jason's grandfather had decided to build like a little privet area, and it had just gone out of control. There was a big privet hedge area over kind of to our right from this thing, and it kind of encircled the lake. Well, this thing took off up that bank, and at the top of that, up the hill, and through all this stuff, I'm thinking, it's going to get tangled up in there. It's going to fall. It's going to, there's nothing that can go through that stuff. And it shot up that hill right behind those houses that were along Meadow Church Road. Dogs up there just started going crazy. And I remember a couple of porch lights come on up there. And then we heard that thing back down that hill at an angle just as fast. Straight through honeysuckle, straight through briars, straight through privet, whatever, into that privet hedge area that was basically between us and Jason's house. we weren't about to go to Jason's house because, it's in there somewhere.
Right.
And we were both well enough to know that, this tent ain't going to offer us much protection. And the only thing we have to protect ourselves is a couple of knives and, Jason's BB rifle. Jason's convinced it's some homeless guy or something out in the woods, some hermit. And
which would also be scary, but...
which would also be scary. But I think he was also trying to justify it as much as possible.
You guys see it move like that. I mean, especially you. I mean, at this point, you've kind of had a little bit more interaction with it, especially the big pine incident. You're like, that's not a person.
It's still, but see, here's the thing. None of these things are being, I'm not connecting any
tied
of
together.
These things.
Right, true.
There's no, I wonder if this is the thing that I passed in the, there's nothing like that. That did not come until, I guess, about 3 or 4 years ago, and that's when I started. I used to work from where I live. Downtown Atlanta is about 35 miles, and in Atlanta traffic, that is about an hour and a half. Which I'm listening to podcasts, and I'm listening to all of this stuff on the way home, and I'm thinking, holy, you know what?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean,
that is right.
This explains that. This explains that. And, oh, my God, if we tie this, that, and none of these things. But as far as I'm concerned, that night at the lake, I had just seen a monster, okay? We stayed basically in that tent or in that camp all night long. It was literally the longest night of my life. I really did not think that we would ever see the dawn, not because we thought we were going to get killed. It was just, it's got to be time for the sun to come up by now.
Yeah.
So and the sun just never came up. The sun just never came up. After a couple of hours, it started raining again. So that even made it more scary because then we couldn't hear anything going on in the woods.
Right.
So we sat in the tent, and I remember doing my best not to cry because I'm older than Jason. I can't let him see me get upset. And I that preteen, early teen machoism. I can't, but boy, I wanted to.
Well, and the other thing that sucks for you guys is that was not even the official first day of summer for you guys. That was like the last day of school, and then you I think you said in your email that it kept you guys out of the woods like the whole summer because of that, right?
Most of the summer we did. If we did want to go play in the woods and everything, we went over to the fort because right across the street from my grandmother's house. We didn't go deep into the woods. We would go down to the lake and fish. Jason always carried his 20-gauge shotgun. I always carried my 22 rifle, and it wasn't that much fun. And we did it at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then when it started getting hot, we would go in the house. It was not we weren't staying out or anything like that. But that was probably the first summer that I can ever remember that I didn't camp out just about every other day or every weekend or something. I mean, that was just it. We played a lot of G.I. Joe in our neighborhoods or in our front yards and stuff and that was all we did that summer until, Ron and Carrie came home and we kind of told them what happened. And I think that was probably the first time that the word Bigfoot was used because Carrie had read in in school somewhere something about Bigfoot, and of course it still was Bigfoot's out out west, out in the northwest. He doesn't live here. It's something else. We kind of made a pact at that time. We don't go in the woods by ourselves anymore. We don't go unarmed.
Yeah.
We all had the little 1980 survival knife with the campus on top.
Yeah.
So we thought we were badass. We thought we were badasses anyway, but it still was not something that we would do. As fall kind of came around, we started going to the woods again, and Ryan and Carrie, they were they hadn't been traumatized by it, so they wanted to get back out, camping and doing stuff like that. And fall was a perfect time to do that because it was it had cooled down, and we can do this and we can do that. And we all hunted squirrels, so we did do that. Squirrels, we would find. Deers, no. Turkey, no. Ducks. At that time, Ducks Unlimited hadn't really come in and repopulated the species like they did in the later 80s. So we didn't have a chance of hunting that. So really the only thing we did was hunt squirrels, fish. I have been known to eat blue jay. It tastes like chicken. But nothing, and we never came across any tracks to my knowledge.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, though, something also very interesting about what was happening to some of the other neighbors and their animals, because you did mention that behind Ryan and Carrie's house, you ran into a couple of, I think they were brothers from school, Jimmy and Matt. So talk about what happened with their dog.
Well, I know that we were out there in the backwoods back behind Ryan and Carrie's. We usually didn't go back there because that area was owned by what was the Eastern Airline Pilots Union, owned all of that real estate as an investment. There was no trespassing signs and stuff in that area, so we really didn't go back there much. But we had found a big lake back there that we didn't know was there, and it was massive compared to Jason. It looked fishy. It looked like there was fishing. We would pick off and go back there and do that. And of course, we all love just exploring the woods. And after the lake incident, we always kind of had an eye and an ear out for anything weird. But we were back there, and enough time had passed that it was no longer a trauma. We came across two friends that we knew from school. They rode our school bus. They were out there. Jimmy, who was the oldest, he was carrying a machete. We were like, "Hey, what's going on?" And they were telling us that I think one of their dogs had ran away, and they were looking for it, and they had found the other dog dead or something. I don't really remember much because it only happened kind of one time. But I do remember a couple of times on the bus with conversations with them and some other kids that they had, something weird had happened. I remember somebody had broken into one of the girls' barns. She had a couple of horses, and they kept the dog food or the cat food in it somewhere, and something had gotten in there and taken the cat food, or taken a big 50-pound bag of cat food or dog food. I don't remember which. They didn't hurt the horses. They didn't do damage to the barn. They didn't take anything else, but all the dog food was gone.
Right.
Had one who said that he heard noises at night. I think I had a friend who said that he saw prints, or his dad had saw prints. Bigfoot.
Yeah, you said that a kid named Henry, his dad said that, you guys need to be careful because there's a homeless man running around the woods somewhere, because he actually found a bare footprint.
Right. Yeah, Henry, he lived about a mile down the road from us. His dad, he was a writer, I believe. He was home a lot. And he had come across some footprints or something, and he had forbade Henry from going in the woods for a couple of weeks because he thought somebody was, stalking around the house. I never saw the prints,
okay.
But
I
think that was one of those situations where we were talking, and Henry had said, "Well, my dad has told me this, so y'all need to be careful not to be going in the woods because," and it kind of came out that. And I think that's all the time that we heard about, the girl with the barn in.
So it was really seeming to come in pretty close to everybody's houses at this point. It's really kind of coming to a head.
Right. And like I said, if there was something in there, it didn't appear to be very dangerous. Okay, right. It just was curious more than anything, I think.
But here's somebody that may disagree with this just a little bit, and that is young Sir Jody, right? And let's talk about what happened with him on his four-wheeler one time.
Okay. Jody, his family owned most of the land out in that area. When my grandfather and grandmother came up from Atlanta during World War II to build a house, they bought the land from them. They were friends with them, and his parents, or his father, basically grew up with my mom and my aunt. When they sold most of the land, they were well off, and they had bought him a four-wheeler, I believe, for his 16th birthday, and he was a year older than I was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we would see Jody, he was one of those people who just kind of liked to be alone most of the time. He was happy fixing things. I talked to him a little while ago. He is a mechanic. He's doing a fantastic job. He's always been good with working on cars and working on small engines. And I had a go-kart that I thought was ruined, sold it to him for like $50. And that afternoon he had it, racing up and down the road.
Mm-hmm.
So it was one of those things.
He's a handy dude.
He was, and he was more happy doing stuff like that than hanging out with us. He did hunt deer. To the best of my knowledge, they never killed a deer around their house. He lived down a creek that ran across the road, or ran under the road, about down the hill about a quarter mile from us. He would ride that four-wheeler up and down that creek all day long during the summer. I remember we were down there in that creek, playing in the creek, walking through it, exploring it, and we came up on his house, and we saw him out piddling around with something. So we walked up, and we're talking to Jody, and I noticed his four-wheeler was sitting there, and it hadn't looked like they'd been ridden. So I asked him, is it broke down? And he said, no, I just don't like riding it anymore. And I'm like, okay, why is that? And he said, well, somebody chased me in the creek, and I'm just kind of, I just don't like going down there anymore. And I'm like, well, why don't you ride it elsewhere? He goes, I just don't like doing it anymore. I wasn't friends enough with him then for him probably to open up, and I don't know if he would have opened up even if we were friends. I've been meaning to talk to his older sister. We're friends on Facebook, and I just don't know how to kind of approach her because I know that she played in the same woods as we did, and I just kind of wanted to get her take on things.
Well, yeah, maybe he would be open to talking to you about it now after all these years.
Right, and he lives close by, so I've kind of toyed with the idea. I just don't really have to approach it.
Yeah, it's always tough. That's always a kind of a delicate thing to do, right? Even for people that you have a good hunch that they had an experience, let alone if maybe you're like way off base for some reason, which I don't think you are, but you never know.
Right,
you said, for a kid that's a loner and that loves just to do his own thing and go four-wheeling, and that story got to me just a little bit just because on a personal level, because of my shadow person experience, I, like Jody, would ride and ride and ride all day long up in Utah, and then once the shadow people were seen, I didn't ride as much anymore. It took a couple of years before I was like, oh, well, I don't really think about it too much anymore, really.
You come across these things, and you have to deal with it the way you can deal with it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I can definitely see, if I'm riding home one night and something came out of the woods after me, I wouldn't be out at night anymore.
Oh, hell no.
And I mean, the same happened, with us staying away from the woods that summer. I mean, we would dip our big toe in, but we wouldn't go fully swimming in there anymore. I mean, and it took us really until Ryan and Carrie got back, and since Carrie was 2 years older, we thought, well, we're kind of safe with Carrie, and it's four of us now instead of two of us, so yeah, we can go in there. And he was really interested at first because he wanted to see where it happened, and we showed him, and of course, 2 or 3 months had already passed by that time.
Yeah.
I know that from what I was seeing that night, when that thing stepped up on the bank and went up there, it was like it was, just taking a regular step for like going up a porch step into a house.
Right.
This thing must have stepped probably 2 or 3 feet up, and it just wasn't that big a deal for it. I couldn't really express that to him then. Again, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, that thing was pretty good size. I will say that I look back on it now, and it wasn't full. It seems like it was skinnier. It was not Patterson film Bigfoot you saw. They say they're smaller down there. Maybe that's it. I don't know. But
does this next story that we're going to talk about, and this may be the coup de grace, and I think that this will be the one that if people want to email me anything regarding your encounters, it'll probably be this next one. And I encourage you guys to do that because I can always forward emails to Chip.
I will do my best to answer it.
Yeah, I mean only if you, if you want to, but it's always up to you guys if you want to answer those kind of things. But have you ever considered, though, and I don't want to try to make any assumptions because we just don't know, but have you ever considered that this next story that you're going to tell was in fact the same creature at the lake, or is that not even probably a possibility? Like, you do feel like that was a Bigfoot?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it was two different things because I don't see them looking at the same. Now, I do know that this happened in 1985. Once again, I know this because, I was I was bribed by my grandfather not to say anything.
Yeah.
And I remember what I did with that money. So,
right. Okay, yeah. So without further ado, start from the beginning.
My grandfather was a man's man and then some. He worked for the Atlantic Steel Company for 40 years, did rollers. When he retired, he was able to devote all of his time to his passion, which was game chickens. He raised them. He had a huge yard back in the woods behind his house, probably about 4 or 5 acres with roosters and hens all over the place. Some of his prize breeding chickens were staked out and had roosts to fly up on at night, so they were able to roam around. He was a man who could just about do anything he set his mind to do. It was a rarity for him to ask for any help whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
He might ask some of his friends for advice, but he's going to do it himself. I can remember him being 60, 65 years old, walking around the chicken yard. He's got a 5-gallon bucket full of water in one hand. He's got another 5-gallon bucket filled with chicken feed in the other, and he's walking around and stopping and feeding and watering the chickens and going on to the next one and feeding and watering the chickens.
Mm-hmm.
And when he ran out, he just walked back to the chicken house and got more. So he was in fantastic shape. My father used to always laugh that he could outwork him, and, he was, 25, 30 years older. He was also hard of hearing. So every time he spoke to you, it was with a super booming voice. He had saying, "You ain't doing better than me. You can't give me any advice. I'll listen if you're doing better."
Yeah.
And that, that's just, that kind of sums him up. Grew up in the Depression along with my grandmother. They were, pinchers. They were just those types of salt-of-the-earth people. Well, one morning, doing summer vacation, I'd stay up and, watch The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson and David Letterman and sleep in until 11 o'clock. And then one morning, there came a tapping on my window. And I kind of look over, and it's my grandfather standing outside on the deck, and he's tapping on my window with a quarter to wake me up. And I get up and go to the front door and open it. He said, "Get some jeans and some boots on. I need your help." This was the first time in my life this has happened. And I'm only 13 or 14, 15 at this time. I'm not a man by any means.
Right.
And he's asking me for help, somebody who doesn't ask anybody for help. I get dressed, and he was very adamant that, I know it's summertime, but let's get it done before it gets too hot. Get your jeans and get some boots or something. And I threw that on and went outside, and we walked up to his and my grandmother's house, and didn't want me to go in and see Grandma. I don't, that was just, come on, let's just get this done. Let's get this done in a hurry. He handed me a shovel, and we walked back to the very back corner of his chicken yard. And his chicken yard had an electric fence around it. And that was to keep possums and foxes, primarily possums, because possums love to eat chicken, out of the yard. He had toyed with this electric fence, I'm sure of. I got into it one time, and it whooped butt. We go back to this back corner, and lying on the electric fence is the biggest dog I have ever seen. And I grew up with dogs all around. We had an Afghan hound. We had several labs. We had a bunch of, different big dogs, German Shepherd mixes, whatever. This thing was at least twice the size of the largest dog we had, which was our Afghan hound. Our Afghan hound was real skinny and everything, but when I would play with her and she would stand up, she was probably about 7 feet tall. Right. on her back legs. This thing was massive, and it was bulky, and it looked like a German Shepherd, black with silver highlights. basically wherever, a German Shepherd is black, it was black.
Mm-hmm.
Anywhere the German Shepherd's kind of a tan or a lighter color, it was kind of, black with silver.
Mm.
Although I would not really even know the term direwolf until Game of Thrones came out, that's what I think that thing was. Okay, some sort of, it was a big animal. And he had already dug a hole next to it. And he had put a tarp down and put the dirt on the tarp so we could just cover it right back up. And he had tied it up, and he just needed me to help pull it into the hole. And we tried, and we just couldn't move this thing.
Mm.
And he said, well, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to go get my truck and pull around here through the woods, and we'll hook it to the truck and pull it in that way. So he goes off and does that and leaves me there. And the entire time I'm looking at this thing, and the more I look at it, the less like a regular dog this thing looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Its chest was broad. It had hocks like a dog would. It didn't have human legs. It had hocks. In fact, it just looked like a big dog, but just more massive. And the more I looked at it, this ain't a dog. And what I figured, just from the way the rigor mortis had kind of set in, this thing was probably past that electric fence and brushed against it. And it got shocked, and like a dog is startled or something like that, it'll swing around and bite whatever is attacking it.
Right.
And I think what it did was it, got shocked, turned around, hit the fence, and fried itself. It wouldn't actually burn itself or anything like that, but, that close to the brain with the mouth and everything, I'm sure that would have killed it. So he came back, and we got it hooked up to the truck and pulled it into the dirt, put it into the hole, put the dirt over it, and did that, and covered it up with the tarp, and he put something down, I think soda ash or something. So he said they would keep the small animals from digging it up.
Mm.
And, and that was it. During that time, while we were digging that, I'm looking at this thing still, and I'm like, Granddaddy, I don't think this is just a regular dog. And, a couple of times he just said, Chip, it's just a dog. It's just a dog. Don't worry about it.
Mm.
And
he said that without you actually bringing anything up. It's like he was kind of reading your mind or just trying to reassure you.
Right. Now, I did mention to him, I don't think it's just, this is a big dog. And, and he would say, this is the dog. So we went on, did that, and got in the truck. And he got in the truck because I was just going to walk home. And he stopped me and he said, here's for helping me. And he hands me a $50 bill. Now, $50 then for 14, 15 years old, that was a lot of money.
That's a nice chunk of change right there.
I mean, normally for something like that, I remember when I needed money and I would cut grass for him, he'd give me $10. So, it wasn't like he was super generous with his passing out money for me. I think, the only reason I got to cut his grass was because he wanted to pay me and, he wanted me to work for him. Otherwise, he would have done it himself. He handed me this $50 bill and said, no, don't tell your grandmama or your parents. You don't need to worry them. And, I'm halfway back to the house before I'm like, why would that worry them?
Mm-hmm.
Why did you give $50? This is a lot of money. And I remember it was $50. I remember what I went and bought with it. I bought G.I. Joe figures. I was excited for getting these G.I. Joe figures because they were the ones that came out in 1985.
Yeah.
They were the first time. So I knew what time it, and stuff. And, I got that, and I had money left over to get this and that and all this other stuff. So, yeah, I spent that money. But, no, judging from the size of that dog and the way it was shaped and whatever was at the lake had knees, not hocks.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's what I was wondering because I just, with you saying it was a little bit on the skinny side, I didn't know, but yeah.
Right, and this thing at the whatever we saw at the lake, it had knees.
Well,
I know that. Go ahead. I'm
sorry, I was just going to say, with you setting us up before telling the story about just how strong your grandfather was, a man's man, he's physically strong and mentally strong. And for him, first of all, not only just to ask you for the help, but then realizing that he couldn't physically pull this thing off of the fence and get it in the hole, which was a priority to do this fast, he actually had to go get the truck just to pull the damn thing into the hole. It must have been so heavy.
Right. And I mean, for him and me to both, we struggled with it for about 20 minutes before he decided to go get the truck.
Wow.
And, we might have moved it an inch or two. I mean, this thing was not, something that grown man, and I wasn't like super bulky. I mean, I was skinny as hell, but I could at least move a full-size dog that was dead.
Right. Well, and there was two of you,
right.
So you'd think you guys would be okay.
Yeah, there was two of us. I think some of the first time you and I corresponded on Messenger or something like that was you had mentioned something about wanting to do a Dogman, a Dogman show.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been listening a lot to Vic Cundiff's Dogman Encounters.
Right.
And I suggested that. Well, I was listening to a bunch of him at that point, and that was really the first time I'd ever heard the term Dogman.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I might have heard it, but until I was listening to his, once again, nothing really, and like I said, direwolf. And I've always wondered, if Bigfoot might be a relic humanoid or hominid from, 12,000 years ago that's, somehow survived. Why can't there be dire wolves still around? And we don't know what dire wolves did. We don't know if they were able to walk upright for any extended period of time. Could they still be around? Could there be relic dire wolves? And could that be the source of the dogmen? This thing was not just a dog. I know that there was a couple of times that, we lived just down the road from my grandparents' house. And we would hear the chickens just go absolutely nuts, say once every 2 weeks or something. And I mean, it would be in the middle of the night, and they would wake us up screaming and hollering and carrying on. And they'd go for about 30 minutes or so, and it would be over with.
I mean, were they actually getting injured or killed or anything, or they just saw something scared the crap out of them?
He put the fence up for a reason. So, I mean, it could have been owls and hawks both go after chickens in that type of situation. Both are illegal to kill. That did not stop my grandfather. So, it could have been owl getting in there and getting one of the chickens that upset them. It could have been a fox, and we really didn't have coyotes back then, but now we have coyotes all over North Georgia.
Well, no, because you had something much bigger to scare the coyotes away.
I guess. I don't, I mean, it could have been that some of the times that we felt like we were being watched, it wasn't by whatever we saw at the lake.
Right.
And sometimes, I don't know if this thing was passing through or what.
Chip, did you ever, I think I know the answer to this, as far as especially what the culmination of burying this massive dog or direwolf was with your grandfather, but did you and your grandfather ever speak of this again?
About a year before, it was after my grandmother had passed, and he was no longer, able to take care of the chickens. He had gotten rid of the chickens. And I had been, and, we were never close much. He was a hard man to kind of, talk to or anything like that. And one time we were sitting on his swing, and I mentioned something about the dog. And he said, yeah, that was a real big dog. And that was the extent of it.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he never really went into anything about it. And then, he ran a few words. He was here right now, and I was asking him questions about this and what he thought of it and everything like that. I can almost guarantee you I wouldn't have gotten any more answers out of it than that.
Right.
Just, that's just how he was. Loved the man to death. He was a fantastic grandfather. It's just he wasn't, he was not Wilford Brimley.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's kind of where that was. Just a lot of things happened back there, and it started growing up shortly after that. They came in and started, they put a road right through where we used to live, Sugarloaf Parkway. Once my grandfather died, my parents really didn't have any reason to stay there anymore. Me and my wife had already moved up to Houston, and they moved up here with it. And my mom still lives right down the road. We have woods up here, and my kids go out and play with them all the time. I go out there with them. I've got an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old, and we're out there doing stuff like that all the time.
Right.
And I don't feel like I'm being watched. There isn't areas in these woods that feel eerie. I try to walk every night or every other night, and sometimes I do it on a track. Some nights I have a little dirt road, a little past the house, and if I walk to the end of it and back, it's 3 miles. And I'll go out there, and there's woods on both sides and everything. And I'm afraid of what's in the woods. These woods feel eerie. I'm being watched. There's nothing like that I felt at home. Back in those woods.
It's definitely funny how, as modern as we are and evolved as, well, at least we like to think we are, we still have those primeval instincts that can kick in even if we don't see anything, and if we don't have to hear anything. We just know something is watching us. Now, before I let you go, Chip, you did write.
Absolutely.
You did write about one more incident that you said happened years later that actually did involve your father and some sounds that you guys heard. Can you tell that story?
Oh, yes. One night, I was over 21, hadn't met my wife yet, still living at home, had basically an in-law suite in the basement, and was living down there, and I woke up early one morning, and I heard, somebody was shooting a shotgun, and it was close by, right above me. So I, grabbed my rifle and put a magazine in, ran upstairs to see what was going on. My mom at the top of the steps said, "Your dad's out on the back porch. There's something out there." I walked out on the back porch and hollered at my dad and let him know that I'm coming out there if he's got a gun. Walked out there. He was at the rail looking into the backyard, which was where the chicken yard used to be. I'm like, what's going on? And he said, "Shh, listen." And it was quiet for a few minutes, and then something started making these howling noises or something. It was between us and the nearest neighbors that were probably, I have no idea where they were, how far they were or anything. But, there's something back in those woods, and it was howling. And he had been listening to it, and he said, "I think it's coyotes, but they don't sound right." And he had shot into the air to see if he could scare them all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if it was coyotes, we had started seeing some coyotes around at that point, but never in the backyard, that area, or anything like that. He thought, well, that'll run them off, and that probably would have ran them off. But they stayed. We kept hearing this for another 30 minutes or so, every 5 minutes or so, and it would seem like it was in a different place, either a little bit further away or a little bit closer, or something.
Did you feel like it was one individual or a couple of them maybe communicating something?
I don't know because I was still thinking in terms of coyotes.
Right.
It might have been a couple communicating. And then, a hurt coyote or something like that. But, that's, after about 30 minutes, they stopped. And my dad had shot 2 or 3 rounds in the air to scare them off. I think our neighbor called down to see if we were okay because he heard the shotgun blasts, and we told him what was going on, and he turned on his light. We never saw anything.
Have you ever heard a recording that was anywhere near what you guys heard that night?
So when I started getting interested into this a couple of years ago, I went on to the BFRO's website, and the first thing I did was check to see if there was any sightings in our area.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one from the late 70s in the Norcross area, and then there was one from, the early 90s in the Beaufort area, which is just north of Swanee, where we were, or Duluth and Swanee, where we were. And then I came across the howls. And to the best of my knowledge, that sounded exactly what we heard that morning.
Wow, that's very cool.
And I don't, of course, you're talking a decade or two between, so, I could be hearing what I want to hear, but that was definitely, that didn't sound like...
remember. Yeah.
Right. I know, once again, hair on the back of my neck stands up, and, that sounds like something I've heard before.
Now, what about Dogman encounters? I know there's not really quite a website like the BFRO for Bigfoot, but what about any Dogman encounters around there? Have you come across any from the podcasts you've listened to or anything you've read?
There have been a couple that I think were in the North Georgia mountains in the area, which we're not too far away from that area. We're in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. We're up on the Piedmont, so it's possible that we had something around here like that.
Yeah.
But, not anything I know of. One of my friends who, he was around about the time I was 21, 22 and everything. He was going to play a practical joke on us because he had to work the night that we were all hanging out and play video games and stuff like that. And he got off work early and parked up the road from us, went down, coming through the woods and everything, and he says something chased him. He, got home, and we're sitting on the couch goofing off, other friends, and he called and says, God, y'all almost caught me tonight. He goes, it wasn't y'all out in the woods? So, he swears that something was behind, once again, that's hearsay and
right.
what he said. But, that happened either just before or just after, probably just before, because I would have maybe put something 2 and 2 together with my dad out in the backyard. So it was a weird area to grow up in. It was a great area to grow up in. But, now that I look back on it, was I doing that? I don't remember hearing any tree knocks. I don't remember, like I said, I don't remember running across any odd smells. I don't, any of these other things. To the best of my knowledge, nobody ever has gone missing in that area. I want to get the missing 411 books and just kind of check that.
Well, I've got most of them, so I can actually help you look into that, because I've got the whole, except for the very last one that he put out, I've got the whole set, so I will help you with that, because I find that very interesting too. This is one of the few stories that you'll hear of basically someone running into a dog man, and it wasn't horrifying, terrifying, and they weren't aggressive, and it's only because the damn thing was dead. As you know, usually these things are very aggressive and have no problem people seeing them or coming near, or the dog man actually going near the person. So, I mean, really, it takes one being deceased to actually not have it be aggressive.
Right. When I started thinking about it, I'm like, I could almost find where we buried it, but I'm not, I have a feeling that it's right behind the BB&T Bank now, next to a Clover. And
that's okay. They won't mind.
I thought about that, but it's just, I love talking about it because I'm all nostalgic now and everything, and I'm thinking, maybe I should call Jody on the way home, But,
I mean, I have no doubt that these things have to kind of, not actual fight, I'm sure they do, but, kind of fight it out for territory and for land. There's only so much. Right. There is a lot of forest in the U.S. I don't want to make it sound like there isn't, but there is only so much to go around for really big creatures like these. So I'm sure they're in the same area.
And, we have taken all the prime real estate, really.
Absolutely.
If it's easy to get to, then we're already there. Like I said, the way that the area grew up around that area, something could easily have been kind of trapped in there. It's right next to an interstate. You're going to have, on the other side, you've got a small town. To the north of you, you've got a small town. To the south of you've got a small town. If you've got, 500, 600 acres to, walk around in there, and you've got plenty of food, which, like I said, we always saw deer tracks.
Yeah.
And we always, we always saw evidence of them, but we just never saw them. We moved up there, honestly, in the first month that I lived up in this area, we lived in a subdivision called Deer Creek Trail. And in our backyard, I saw more deer that first month than I think I'd seen in my entire life before that.
I mean, do you think there is any possibility that there could be any bones left whatsoever? I mean, you said that was back in, 85? I mean, could something still be there in the ground where you put that thing?
We buried it in Georgia red clay. I have no idea how well that holds up and stuff. I could probably narrow the area down to within, 1,000 square feet.
Well, if we have any geologists listening,
oh yeah,
biologists, let us know if you think that thing could still be in the ground and not be completely broken down.
But, you're talking, once again, you're talking about getting out there with sonograms and all sorts of stuff to find it. And I just wonder if BB&T is going to say, yeah, go right ahead. Go, just park in our parking lot and do this on the weekend. No,
that's why with Chip, we've got to go under the cover of night and do it all like illegal style, right? I mean.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
We'll wear masks the whole nine.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Be like, oh, it's for a podcast. It's for Dogman. They'll be like, what have you lost your damn mind?
This is scientific research.
Yeah,
people. Come on.
This is science. Damn it! Just go back in, do your business. We'll be done here shortly. Well, actually, maybe we won't. We don't know. Yeah. I mean, would you ever want to see one of those alive? If that thing was alive, would you see a thing? Have an encounter with it?
Not unarmed.
Yeah.
And preferably something larger than 30 caliber. And I'd love to sneak up on it and it not sneak up on me.
Yeah, we all wish that, but we're pretty bumbling loud ass things in the forest, so I don't know if we can do that. No, that's across the board. That's what you hear. I hear people. I had a weapon, but it wasn't big enough, so I didn't fire because I didn't want to die.
Yeah, you did. I didn't want to piss it off. Yeah. Exactly. And, but I want to get to a point where I can take some time off and go up to the North Georgia mountains and take some time off and go to the Great Smoky Mountains. I've been up there, a lot of times, but it's been, Bigfoot hunting
for this,
or anything like that. And at the same time, I'm old enough now to think it's probably not a good idea because what if I find it?
Right.
And at my age, I look at her a lot and think you're lucky to still be around from some of the stupid stuff you've done. So.
Well, just you and that pine tree story. Holy hell! I mean, you walked right by the thing, and you gotta wonder if. Sometimes the Bigfoot have a sense of humor, and they're just like, "Does he really not know what he just walked by?" Like they.
I'm sitting here thinking. I'm sitting here thinking. Okay, I know what if I had known then, kind of what I know now, what would have gone through my mind? And then I'm thinking, I'm wondering if I surprised it too.
Right.
I'm wondering if it's sitting there, picking berries and stuff, and all of a sudden, holy shit!
Yeah,
where the hell did he come from?
The hell this?
Yeah. And it's just funny to think back and all of these things, and there's probably other stuff that I don't even put two and two together that happened.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times there was stuff in the woods that it was James and John, and I still have that mindset of the two delinquents that were doing all these things to us, coming across and thinking, wait a minute, it couldn't have possibly been them. Why would they expend that much energy just to mess with some kids down the road?
Right.
And then again, I think, teenagers, they suck.
Yeah,
so
they do stupid shit. Yeah.
They might have done that. I mean, we know they stole our bikes because the police caught them with our bikes. So, they were definitely actively messing with us.
Right.
But getting in a gorilla costume and walking down, in the middle of the night. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they didn't do that.
No,
I'm pretty sure I know.
That takes a lot of commitment, and that would be a bad idea when everybody knows everybody else has a gun. So that would be monumentally stupid.
And
I mean, if you think of anything else, shoot me an email. We'll be in touch, of course. And then, like I said, I will forward you any correspondence that I get regarding Europe, because especially when people, and I'm fine when they don't, but especially when people share a location, I get a ton more correspondence, because then people have maybe a relationship to that area, and the relationship.
I grew up so and so. Yeah, and that's and like I said, I don't feel like there's a reason to keep that location secret, and maybe with the geography around there and how it could have been in. That's kind of relevant to, why is this going to be in North Georgia? Why is it in this area?
Right.
And, there's nothing left of it now.
Well, and that's what happened with the judge, right? Like when he told his story, even though he was, he kept his name secret, like the location was a little bit more like, okay, it's right here on this road. I mean, I had a woman, and I forwarded him the email. She used to live right down there. And she goes, I remember one night she had like a couple Dobermans, I think, and they were going bonkers. And she just remembered the hair standing up and, being frightened about this and knowing that it was something very wrong. And that was in that very same area and around the time that the judge told that story. So that's why it's so cool when you guys come on and share these. So I can't thank you enough for doing that, Chip, and for being patient, and we finally were able to connect. And yeah, hey, any listeners out there that have strings you can pull, or maybe you do have some, like Chip said, some ground scanning equipment, give me a holler, because we could do a little feel out to the parking lot in Georgia and dig up a damn dog, man, and finally prove it. There you go.
You got time for one more story that has nothing to do with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. We had a kid. I won't give his name on the air. He was just a pain in the ass on our school bus. And he was one of those kids that, if he didn't get his way, he would go and tattletale, even if he wasn't tattletale on anything that really happened.
Oh, that little shit.
All right. Yes, little shit. Well, he was in the same grade as Jason, and one year they ended up in the same class together, and, they started building a little bit of a friendship. Well, he lived just across the creek, down near Jody's, and we had in our fort, we hung out together, and we were all military types and out in the woods being all survivalists and everything, and doing stuff like that. Well, one day, just before school started, Carrie came home with a black belt magazine. And in the back of the black belt magazine, there was all sorts of weapons. And all that you had to do was sign this thing that says you're 18 years old and order anything you want out of this black belt magazine. Well, we didn't have any money, but we always got money for school lunches and stuff like that. So we convinced our parents, all of us, that we need 25 extra cents to get an extra thing of milk at lunch every day.
Saving it up.
And what we were planning on doing was any coins that were, that no pennies, just, dimes and nickels and quarters and anything that we got and everything. We had a big Tupperware box of some sort. We got it in our fort, and we would just put it in there every day. And we did this, and our big plan was to save up and do this, and get it cash and turn it into cash and everything, get money orders, send off for swords and nunchucks and sais and everything myself. About end of January that year, we had that thing probably 3 pulled out.
Mm-hmm.
And Jason decided he's going to invite this guy over to see the fort, and they were just going to hang out there and everything. Well, Jason shows him, or that's where we kept the Tupperware thing. He showed him all of this coins and everything. And then he turned out to being a shit like he normally is and told everybody else. So we were, afraid that somebody was going to come and steal all of the coins.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, being the reader that Carrie was, he had read about Oak Island, and his solution was we were going to bury this, the buried treasure.
Yeah.
We had enough in there that it was too heavy for me and Ryan to lift. While Jason and Carrie were digging a hole back near Jason's house, me and Ryan had to go to get the Tupperware, and we couldn't even budget. So we had to unpack it and carry it in sacks. Okay, it was a lot. Carry it up there, put it back, carry the Tupperware box up there, put the Tupperware box in the hole, and then dump all the coins back in it. All right.
That's a lot of coins.
Oh yeah, I mean, had no idea how much that was.
You guys were not messing around.
We wanted some real swords.
You sure as hell did.
So we buried it and everything, filled in. Carrie drew a map and everything and cut it in fourths, and each one of us had a fourth of the map, and it was also very dramatic and cool. And we forgot about it by the end of the year. And literally, after my grandfather died, we were cleaning out his house, and I came across the quarter of the map. And that thing is probably 30 feet under the main entrance of the Gwinnett Arena.
Oh. It's under an arena now?
the parking lot lot entrance.
Oh, crap.
But yeah, I mean, and like I said, I had great friends, and we did all sorts of things like that. And it like I said, it just brought back all sorts of memories. I sat down, I started typing out that email, and I'm like, God, I wonder what so and so's doing. God, I miss Jason. God, and
well, and you lost Jason, right, in a car accident or something, but he was still quite young.
My junior year would have been his 10th grade year. He probably had his car maybe 2 or 3 months, and ran into the back. Was on his way home from his girlfriend's house and ran into the back of a logging truck.
Oh God!
And I mean, and by that time we'd kind of grown apart. We were in high school, and he was going. I think he was even going to a different school at that point. That was what happened to him. Ryan and Carrie, they went to a different high school. When they went to high school, they were going to a private school. So I really don't know what happened to them. I've done searches on Facebook, just stalking people.
Yeah, we all look up folks from our past. Sure.
Yeah. But yeah.
And that coin story is so funny because with you saying that it's under an arena now, it does make you wonder about Oak Island. If all the millions of dollars that the Laginas and the History Channel, I'm sure, is helping out maybe with that. Maybe who knows who's actually paying for it, but it makes you wonder if if the truck that they're drilling with is actually sitting on top of it, or if the war room, the quote unquote war room where they have the Skype video chat, really just under that damn thing. I mean, who knows where it is? I wonder how much money you guys have buried under the arena. I mean, if you can't lift it, if you had to separate it all and then into the Tupperware, the massive bin, that's a nice little chunk of change you guys saved up after all that time.
Yeah, there's probably a couple of $100 at least.
That's gone now.
I mean, but we had started doing that from the first day of school.
Yeah.
And you're looking at $1.25 from all of us.
Yeah.
And so.
Oh my God, that's funny. What? So you found the map. And then what did you do? You figured it out quite quickly. Exactly what was there now.
I'm like, holy shit, I remember this. And I mean, and I'm going in my mind, I'm where everything is. And I'm thinking, and then I realized, oh yeah, that was down there in that, area where they filled all of that in to build the parking lot. And they put a lot of dirt in there to build that parking lot.
Gotta make sure that's level. It's all and concreted now.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God, that's funny.
Yeah. But, and it was another one of those things. Oh, yeah, first, end of the year, that's what we'll do. That's what we'll do. And we'll get it all out and do that. Well, once again, Carrie and Ryan headed for Daytona Beach, and Jason just hung around. And, you know.
Just got busy. It's just funny how, like you said, it was like a very serious thing. Like, okay, we have 4 separate maps. Everybody has a map. You keep it secret, keep it safe, like Gandalf, right? And then it's just covered in concrete now.
And put it somewhere where no one will find it.
Right.
I'm thinking, well, I'll put it up in my grandmother's writing desk because no one's going to look there.
Right.
Like we go to any of the teenagers around at that time would have gone to such a great lengths just to find maps and would even expect we had maps.
Well, at least now, like, no one's gonna get to it. I mean, no one can steal it now. It's definitely safe. Oh, so that's pretty cool. It's like its own time capsule, of a bunch of kids. Like when you watch the movie it's such a nice relationship between all the kids, and it brings back nostalgia. So I think that's pretty cool. Actually, it'll always be there. It was we saw watching Stranger Things, and that first season, my youngest son was about 11 years old, and we're watching it, and I'm pointing out stuff. I'm like, we did stuff like that. We did that. Oh yeah, we all had bikes like we did, and it was just that's what I grew up in, and now, the sad thing is too many kids are sitting around playing video games instead of getting out in the woods. No, I've brought that up before, that there was somebody that wrote an article, or maybe it's just part of an article, where kids, quote unquote kids, like, 9 to 15 or whatever, thought that Stranger Things was just nothing but crap because it was so unrealistic that kids were just riding bikes all around the neighborhood and they could stay out after dark, and and it's like, no, actually we did do that stuff. You guys just don't do that now. So it's really sad. My really kids, but neither one of them can comprehend not having a cell phone. Right. Oh no, it would drive them nuts. Yeah, I know how that goes. If I had a microwave and a George Foreman grill when I was 12 years old, I would have been 300 pounds. Yeah, I know. Just the George Foreman would be amazing. That's an incredible piece of machinery right there. Oh yeah. Well, Chip, I can't thank you enough for being so patient to get this done, and for, like you said, you chose me to tell your stories too, and I just think that's so awesome. And you put it out there and said, I've run out of, I'm low stuff here. Does anybody have anything? And I'm like, I've been holding on to this for a year or so, and the more I think about it, the more interesting it might be. And I thought, Shannon's asking for it, I'm going to give it to her. Well, I appreciate that. No, because I remember at one point, and I'm not knocking it at all. I was just getting a lot of like hauntings and paranormal and shadow people, which is great. I love that stuff too. Like, oh man, like where's all the the Bigfoot and the Dogman? Oh yeah, I mean your bread and butter. Your bread and butter is Sasquatch. That's how I started. So I mean, it's not what I saw first, but it's how I got in this and collecting stories. So I can't thank you enough for coming forward and telling these, and that extra little Curse of Oak Island story at the end. That extra nugget, I love it. Oh my God. We'll be in touch. I promise to forward any correspondence that I get in your encounters, because I know I'll get those. Okay. If I come up with anything else, or if I'm about 40 miles from the Georgia Guidestones, I thought about going out there a couple of times. If I go out there and take pictures. Oh, I'd love that. I'd appreciate that very much. Yeah, if you think of anything else too, from when you're a kid, sometimes that happens. Things just kind of like a lightning bolt, they hit you and you remember. Let me know. All right. All right, Chip. Thank you so much. You have a good night out there. You too, dear. Well,